We're having a conversation.
Yes, we are.
Hitler and Mussolini did not have a conversation. Hitler was talking like for 3-4 hours without stopping, and Mussolini became very sweaty, and like aides came in and handed him papers that Rome is being bombed the very minute, but he couldn't get out. Like Hitler was very dominant in the room, very, very dominant in the room, and from that moment on, Eukodal became kind of his favorite drug. And now comes the pun. When Germany lost, a lot of patents were also lost from Germany and became possession of America. And the patent of Eukodal also traveled to America. And Eukodal is oxycodone. So what has created the American opioid crisis is the very same opioid that was Hitler's favorite opioid. Wow. Sold in America as pills. Crushed and sniffed, whatever, I don't know, Hitler was injecting it from the start, He didn't fuck around with pills, because he still had these stomach problems. He didn't like a medicine to go orally, he didn't like it took too long, You don't know, you take something now and it's acting like in 45 minutes, and not good, The injection is the immediate effect, so that's what he wanted. He would go to a military briefing. When the war was in 1944, the generals were just, they knew it was lost. They came from the Eastern Front. People were dying like every day. Like it was over. But they came to the meeting to tell Hitler basically, or you want to save your men. But Hitler on oxycodone, on Eukodal, as it was called then, had so much power in the room, like so much charisma. He was very charismatic early on, but he had lost his charisma in the meantime. But through Eukodal, he could reinstall his charisma, being good in the room. And he would and I read a lot of witnesses' reports, from generals. A lot of them wrote books afterwards or made notes. What happened? They said when they were with Hitler in this room, they were convinced that Hitler knew something that they didn't know. Like he had a wonder weapon up his sleeve. Like he knew that the war would turn around and we would win, the Germans would win in the end, because he was so convincing on this Eukodal. So Hitler was very clever actually in using that drug to, for his horrific vision,
Wow.
Yeah. And you can examine this day by day, by studying the papers of Morel, and then also studying other, accounts, because it's always good to look at more, not only have one source, but there's quite a lot on it. So it is quite surprising no one ever wrote about that before.
Well, it's fascinating because if you think about how much is written about Hitler and how much Hitler has been studied, that they didn't study that.
It's totally crazy, actually.
Because it has such a profound effect on the way you think and behave.
It does, yeah. I mean, there was one... We all know that on July 20th, 1944, there was the most it wasn't successful, but almost successful assassination attempt when the bomb by Stauffenberg blew up in the headquarters in the east. Operation Valkyrie, it was called. It was a code name. And afterwards, Morel rushes in, the doctor rushes in. Hitler's quite injured, actually, which Nazi propaganda later said, the Führer was not injured. He was quite injured by that detonation. I mean, he was sitting there, and the bomb was, on the other side of the table leg, and the table leg was quite thick, and the table was thick, so he was very lucky that he didn't die. But he had, hundreds of splinters in his body, and his eardrums were blown, and he was bleeding from his ears, and he was, totally, he was, he was injured, And Morel immediately comes in and gives him Eukodal, because in the evening Mussolini came for a meeting. He was already in the train. So you can see an hour later, Hitler, on top of his game again, joking with Mussolini, and the other officers have lost a leg, died, so and then actually from that moment on, Hitler, that's July 20th, 1944, until the very end, May 8th, 1945, when the war ends. That is his heaviest drug consumption, because then he's really this is the most intense time. One of the things, for example, that happens is that to treat his blown eardrums, which were connected with heavy pain that he experienced, a new doctor came in. Giesing was his name, and he had cocaine He brought cocaine, which was a legal product at the time, also by Merck. Germany was importing the coca leaves from Peru mostly. And then Merck cocaine was supposed to be the best in the world. Like there were even like product forgers in China who like replicate the Merck label with the Merck cocaine. Merck cocaine was the best cocaine. And this doctor came in and he wanted to give the cocaine because it was something to numb the pain, basically. It was an anesthetic. And Hitler was like, I want more of this stuff. And Giesing writes this down. I found these documents actually in Washington in the National Archive. Hitler demands to use cocaine, like he wants the doctor to brush it into his nostrils, which is the most effective way to take cocaine, I guess. And then he's like, finally, I can think clear again. And the doctor realized this is a drugged guy. Like he once he gets like onto a potent drug, he like completely embraces it and wants it more. So Giesing became very, like tried to get the coke away from Hitler. Hitler demanded more and more of these cocaine treatments because I can feel, finally I can breathe again and I don't feel like injured anymore. And actually on cocaine, he developed the strategy of a second Ardennes offensive. We talked about the mountainous terrain of the Ardennes in Belgium in 1940. And Hitler wanted to do it again in late 1944, like a surprise attack. And like his generals, they couldn't believe it because it was a ridiculous idea. Because the Americans were already on the continent. Like it was no chance it could have worked out. It would just mean that a lot of young German soldiers are going to die. That's what it meant. His second Ardennes offensive. But he had it on cocaine. You can see it very clearly. Like Morel. And Morel didn't like this, he didn't like this other doctor coming in with the cocaine. Like the doctor started competing. It's called the doctor's war because the one guy gives him cocaine and Morel gives him oxycodone, which is an opioid. So Hitler was kind of speedballing in August and September 1944 and made very crazy then decisions, very bad, very for the Nazi war effort, very bad decisions for the world. It was good that he was so fucked up. I actually spoke to British historian who told me that he had investigated, Anthony Beaver is his name, a great colleague of mine. He had investigated the British intelligence's plan to assassinate Hitler, because obviously there were these plans, and they had realized in 1944 that it's actually not good to assassinate Hitler because he was already so off the rails that he weakened, the German war effort. Let's say Hitler was assassinated, then let's say Himmler becomes the Führer or something like this. Like Himmler, he was also a total freak. Like he did 2 hours of yoga each morning because he thought the Aryan race is connected with ancient Vedic. So he was into yoga, but he was not into drugs. So let's just say they would have had an efficient leader, would have been more dangerous basically to the Allies than keeping totally drugged out Hitler.
Wow. So they wanted him to stay fucked up because it was better.
Yeah. They actually did not bomb pharmaceutical companies until like in December 1944, British bombers bombed the Merck company, and then Eukodal could not be made anymore. And actually Hitler then moves to the bunker and he doesn't have Eukodal anymore, which was, his drug of choice. He received it every other day in a very high dosage, 20 milligrams intravenously of the most potent opioid. So he became a junkie. He became addicted to this. So then when he moves to the bunker in the end phase of the war, just before that, the Merck production site had been bombed, who were supplying it. Morel doesn't have it anymore, and that creates quite a friction between patient A, as Morel called Hitler, and the doctor, because the doctor basically made him hooked on a substance, and suddenly it's like the one mistake of the dealer shouldn't make your client hooked, and then you can't supply anymore, and also no one else could supply. Hitler couldn't go somewhere else. There's a report by Morel driving on a motorcycle through bombed-out Berlin, like February, March 1945, like going from pharmacy to pharmacy, asking, do you still have like a supply of Eukodal,
Wow.
So the situation became, Hitler lost World War II, which was not good for him, but he also was on withdrawal, heavy withdrawal from opioids, which made him feel like shit. So that leads to the complete degeneration of the character.
Wow.
Yeah, so that Third Reich kind of crumbled in on itself.
Fascinating. Probably would have lost anyway, but still,
Of course.
fascinating that it all happened, and it's kind of ironic that it happens while he's in full withdrawal.
Yeah. I mean, the only drug really that he had left in the end was Harmine, which we spoke about Harmine. Like I studied like what Morell still had like in his bag, basically. Like looked at the bottom of his bag and he still had Harmine, so he gave Harmine to Hitler. So Hitler was I don't know what Harmine does to you if you just take it singularly, but it's doesn't, you know. And sugar. Like Hitler more and more demanded cake. Because sugar does actually give you a little high. I mean, it does, you
A
know.
little bit.
Even if you're in the bunker losing World War II, you still kind of crave that sugar high. But at the time, they had already crumbled the cake for him because he couldn't. Like he was shaking so much from the withdrawal. Like he took it in a spoon and kind of put it in his mouth. And,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's in Blitz we find like a new biography in a way of Hitler, a more accurate one actually.
That is so fascinating. Wasn't there recorded instances of JFK? Didn't he have a doctor that would prescribe some sort of amphetamines to him as well?
JFK is a very interesting case. He had chronic pain, and there is reports that he used also methamphetamine. Also, he had depression. So he had a kind of a Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah.
And one time I found a connection, but I don't really, I couldn't research more about it, that this Dr. Feelgood of JFK actually had studied what Morell had given to Hitler. But it's, you know, you probably don't even need to study Morell. It kind of, that's what's out there. So JFK, I think, received quite a lot of medications. That's why it's interesting. What I wrote about in Tripped is his possible LSD experience. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, you talked about that with Jesse Waters.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's only one source for it, and we always have to be skeptical if there's only one source. If there's two sources, it's always much better. But one source, and it's actually Timothy Leary's autobiography. He describes, and I don't think he made this up. I have no reason to believe that he made this up. He describes how a woman called Mary Pinchot visits him at Harvard, telling him, because he was known as he was still employed by Harvard. He was, the LSD guy, basically. If you wanted to know about LSD, you would ask Leary. He had done the most research. And also some of the research is very good. Very, it's very interesting. So she went to him. She was like a socialite in Washington, Mary Pinchot. She had been married to a CIA guy, but they had been divorced. She was probably too, quote unquote, left for him. She was more like a peace person, I guess. And she was also a very good friend of JFK. They were rumored to be lovers. She was in the White House a lot. He took her to functions. Like, she was a part of his life. And she visited Leary, saying to Leary, I have a very powerful friend. This was in April '63. And I want to, do the experience with him. And Leary was all, he kind of was probably thinking this is JFK, but she didn't disclose it. She didn't disclose who this powerful friend was. And Leary said, yeah, I'm going to come with you. We're going to do it together. And she said, no, just give it to me. I want the stuff, the LSD, and I want to kind of get some guidelines from you. How do you do like a LSD session? Like, so they had this, Leary told her a bit about what he thinks, how it should be done, set and setting. JFK shouldn't do it while he's like doing a press conference. He should do it when there's maybe he doesn't have to go on camera anymore that day. Maybe it's in the evening, in the White House. So she takes the LSD, and then there's no record that they actually took it together, because there's just no record. There's her diary, but we'll come to her diary in a second. What happened was, a little bit later, and you can pull that up on YouTube, you can see that it's quite interesting. Kennedy gave his so-called peace speech at the American University, which is, I think, in Washington, or maybe not, but is in Washington. Yeah. And in this peace speech, it's kind of funny actually to see him, because we have to understand that JFK was quite a hawk. Like, he was really a Cold War guy. Like, he was a Democrat. Like, the Democrats, they're all for war. They like, it's confrontation. We have to be safe. We have to protect the country. We're serious. Arms race. That was his thing. He was not different than other presidents. But in this peace speech that he gave a few weeks after Mary Pinchot received the LSD from Leary, he has a completely different agenda, and he sounds like basically like a hippie. He says, like, yeah, like very presidential, giving a speech in front of all these students, and like, nice day in America, and he gives presidents coming, give a speech, and he talks about, we all live on this planet together, even the Russians, we all care for our children, and we're all like, we're all in this together. And he basically shifts course. Like, he says that this arms race is kind of ridiculous. It just burns resources, and we must come to a different understanding. And then he gets killed like a few months later. So that is just, those are the facts, and I think I'll leave it at the facts. So fact also is that Mary Pinchot was shot in the head a few weeks or months after the assassination of JFK. And that day of her death, she was jogging in Washington, close to her apartment. There was a breaking into her apartment, and her diary was taken. So maybe that's the source actually that links JFK to LSD, and maybe JFK was eventually killed because he took LSD and changed his mind. But maybe
there's a lot of factors why he was killed, right?
Obviously. I mean, it's kind of a mystery why he was killed. Why does he need to be killed? But maybe that change of mind, becoming like saying like arms race must stop, which pisses off a lot of people in the military industrial complex who are like base their whole thing on the arms race. Maybe that becomes a very big threat and he must be eliminated. Who knows? But maybe it was he had a change of mind for sure. Maybe because of LSD, maybe because of the love making with Mary Pinchot, or maybe they were just smoking joints. They were seen. There are sources for that they had smoked joints in the White House before, but I don't know if cannabis would kind of bring about this change of mind. But LSD certainly could, because the default mode network, which is Cold War arms race, suddenly gets a little less energy. Other parts of the brain is like, maybe we should do it differently.
And also the realization that if anybody can change things, he literally has a responsibility to express himself in that way.
Absolutely.
If he really is a leader.
Yeah.
Norman, thank you very much. This is a fascinating conversation. That was just 3 hours. Isn't that crazy? Just flew by. Thank you very much for all your work. I mean, what you've done by just the Hitler stuff, just explaining all that is it's so illuminating. It's so interesting. And I really hope everybody goes out and buys your books. So Tripped and Blitzed is the other one?
Yeah.
And are they available?
It's actually a present for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you can have the Tripped also.
Thank you. Are these available in audiobook as well?
They are, but I do encourage everyone to read. But they are available in audiobook.
It is great to read, but sometimes people are stuck in traffic.
Yeah, right.
And it's a great way to consume
Of course, they're out there in audiobooks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you.
I hope we will see each other again.
Yeah, let's do it again. Well, when is this next book that you're working on going to be out?
Stone Sapiens will be out, I think, in the fall of 25.
Okay, in the fall of 25. Come on back. Let's do it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Would that make you sad to die on Mars? Looking back at the planet you were born on?
No, I think it would be actually, in some ways, maybe the best way to die, knowing that you're on the first wave of people expanding the reach into the stars. It'd be an honor.
The following is a conversation with Chris Mason, professor of genomics, physiology, and biophysics at Cornell. He and colleagues do some of their research out in space, experiments on space missions that seek to discern the molecular basis of changes in the human body during long-term human space travel. On this topic, he also wrote an epic book titled The Next 500 Years Engineering Life to Reach New Worlds, that boldly looks at what it takes to colonize space far beyond our planet and even journey out towards livable worlds beyond our solar system. This is the Lex Friedman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Chris Mason. You wrote a book called The Next 500 Years Engineering Life to Reach New Worlds, and you dedicate it to, quote, to all humans in any extinction-aware sentience. How fundamental is awareness of death and extinction to the human condition?
I think this is actually one of the most human-specific traits and features that we have. It's actually maybe one of the few things that only we have and no one else has. So it sounds scary. It sounds like what people often don't like to think about their death, except now and again, or at funerals, or to recognize their mortality. But if you do it at a species-wide level, it's something that is actually an exemplary human-specific trait that you're exhibiting. You think about something that is the loss of not just your life or your family or everyone you see, but everyone like you. And that is, I dedicated it because I think we might not be the last sentients to have this awareness. I'm actually hoping we'll just be the first. But as far as we know, we're the only. And I think this is the part of the moral thrust for the book, is that we're the only ones that have this awareness. That gives us a duty that only we can exercise so far.
So we definitely contemplate our own mortality at the individual level. It is true. When you wrote it, it was really powerful to realize for me that we do contemplate our extinction, and that is a creative force. So at the individual level, contemplating your own death is a creative force.
Yes.
Like I have a deadline.
Yes.
But contemplating the extinction of the whole species, I suppose that stretches through human history. That's many of the sort of subtext of religious ideas, is that like if we screw this up, it's going to be over.
And Revelation and in every religious text has some view of either the birth or the death of the world as they know it. But it was very abstract. It was fiction almost, or in some cases complete fiction of what you hope or think might happen. But it's become much more quantified and much more real, I think, in the past, several hundred years, and especially in the past few decades, where we can see, a sense of responsibility at a planetary scale. So when we think about, like, say, terraforming Mars, that would just be the second planet we've engineered at a planetary scale. We're already doing it for this one, just not that well.
Well, yeah, that's right. So we're like a bunch of ants, extinction-aware sentience ants that are busy trying to terraform this planet to make it habitable so we can flourish. And then you say that it's our duty to expand beyond Earth, to expand to other planets, to find a good backup, off-site backup solution. Why the word duty? It's an interesting word.
Duty is something that usually puts people to sleep, I'll say this. So duty, duty is a bit like death. People don't often like to really think, wake up in the morning and think, what is my duty today? Most people. There are some people that think about it every day. People in active military service wake up. It's a very concrete sense of duty to country. Sometimes you can think about it, though, in terms of family. You feel a duty towards your spouse, your kids, your parents. You feel a real duty to them because you want them to flourish and to be safe. So we do have this sense of duty, but you don't, very much like death, you don't think about it actively usually. It's something that just becomes embedded in your day-to-day existence. But I think about duty because people think about duties for themselves, but there has never been a real overarching duty that we all feel as a species for each other and for generations that haven't yet been born. And I think I want people to have a sense of the same love and compassion and, fighting even to the tooth and nail, with the way you'd protect your family, the way you'd fight for a country, for example, to feel the same way towards the rarity and preciousness of life and feel that sense of duty towards particularly extinction-aware life, which is just us so far. This ability that we have this awareness of not only our own frailty, which of course is often talked about, and climate change, and people think about pandemics, but other species that we've sometimes caused extinction, but very soon will be even de-extinctifying species like the woolly mammoth. Colossal is a recent startup that's doing that. I'm on their advisory board, and it might happen in 3 or 4 years. So it's an interesting point in history where we can actually think about preventing death at a species-wide level, and even resurrecting things that we have killed or that have gone away, which brings its own series of questions of, just as when you delete something from an ecosystem, adding something can be completely catastrophic. And so there are no real guidelines yet on how to do that, but the technology now exists, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I've just been working on backup and restoring databases quite a bit recently, and you can do quite a lot of damage when you restore improperly.
Yeah,
So when we
yeah, it's-
when we bring back the mammoths, it might be like you have to be careful bringing that back.
Yes.
Like the best of science, the best of engineering is both dangerous and exciting, and that's why you have to have the best people, but also the most morally grounded people
Yes.
pushing us forward.
Yeah.
But on the point of duty, there's a kind of sense that there's something special to humanity, to human beings, that we want to preserve. And if that little flame, whatever that is, dies, that will be a real shame for the universe. What is that? What is special about human beings? What is special about the human condition that we want to preserve? Why do we matter?
There are some people who think we don't. There are some people who say, well, humans, take it or leave it. They think they're misanthropes. So the book is, on the one sense, a call to misanthropes to hopefully shake them out of their slumber. But that some
What
people,
does the word misanthrope mean?
just people that dislike humanity. They're just, again, they're all just
They're called nihilists, Donnie.
they're
That's a shout out for Big Lebowski fans.
people. They're like, nothing matters, and why does any? Like, and they just apply it more particularly to humans. But there are endless reasons, I think, to cherish and celebrate what humans have done. At the same time, many things we've done awfully, and genocide and nuclear weapons testing on unsuspecting citizens of remote islands. There are definitely things we've done bad, but the poetry, the music, the engineering feats, the getting to the moon and eventually already rovers on Mars, these extraordinary feats that humans have already accomplished. Interested really a sense of beauty, I think, is something that is. You can't ask ants or cockroaches about their favorite paintings, or maybe if you could, it would be very different from ours. But in either case, there's a unique perspective that we carry, and I think so. That's something. Even just it's the age-old question in biology. I'm a geneticist, so this comes up a lot of what makes humans unique. And so, is it bipedalism? Is it our intelligence? Is it tool making? Is it language? All those things I just listed. Other species have some degree of those traits. So it's a question of degree, not of type of trait, that defines humans a little bit. But I think for the extinction awareness, that is a uniquely human trait. That is, to our knowledge, no other species or entity or AI or sentience that carries that awareness of the frailty of life, of our own life, but all life.
And maybe it is that awareness of the frailty of life that allows us to be so urgently creative, create beauty, create innovation. It just seems like if you just measure, humans are able to create some sort of subjectively beautiful things. And I see science that way. I see engineering that way. And ants are less efficient at that. They also create beautiful things, but less aggressively, less innovation, less building, like standing on the shoulders of giants, building on top of each other over and over and over, where you're getting like these hierarchical systems where you greater and greater levels of abstraction. Then you use ideas to communicate those ideas, and you share those ideas, and all of a sudden you have the rockets going out into space.
Yep. Which ants have been building the same structures for millions and millions of years with no real change, and so that is the key differentiator.
Yet.
Yeah, that's right. We've got an experiment going right now, and maybe they'll change. But
Well, yeah, we will bring up some extreme organisms. Another thing you're interested in. Okay. One interesting thing that comes up much later in your book is something I also haven't thought of, and it's quite inspiring, which is the heat death of the universe is something worth fighting against.
Yes.
Like, that's also an engineering problem.
Yes.
You kind of, you seriously look at the next 500 years. And that's such a beautiful thing. Seriously, we'll talk about like the uncertainty involved with that and all the different trajectories, but to seriously look at that, and then to seriously look at like what happens when the sun runs out? What happens when the universe comes to an end? Like we have an opportunity and a kind of duty, like you said, to fight against that. And that was so inspiring to me to think, wait, maybe we'll actually, that's a worthy thing to think about.
Maybe
Like-
we can prevent it, actually. Yeah.
Right. Come up with the best known understanding current of how things end. We kind of are building an intuition and data and models of the way the universe is, the way it started, the way it's going to end. So our best model of the end, let's start thinking about how that could be prevented, how that could be avoided, how that could be channeled and misdirected, and you can pivot it somehow. That's really inspiring. That's really powerful. I never really thought about it. I thought that, eventually all things end. And that was the kind of melancholic notion behind all of it. None of this matters in a way. Just to me, that's also inspiring to enjoy the moment, to really live in the moment, because that is truly where beauty exists, is in the moment. But there is a long lasting aspect to beauty that is part of the engineering ethic, which is like, tell me what the problem is and we're going to solve it.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? The long scale beyond 500 years. Do humans have a chance?
Absolutely. I think we have the best chance of any species, and actually the best chance that humanity's ever had. So I think a lot of people fear that we can or will kill ourselves. Actually, my favorite question I ask at the end of every interview for every potential graduate student, medical student, faculty, whoever I'm interviewing for whatever reason.
Yes.
The last question is, well, how long do you think that humans or our evolutionary derivatives will last? And the answers are shockingly wide-ranging. Some people say, I think we've only got 100 years left. Or some people say billions. Some people say as long as the universe lasts. But to the person who once said, it was a medical student applicant who said, I think we've only got 100 years left. And I was like, really? For all of humanity, everything will be gone in 100 years? And he said, yes. And I said, well, sweet Jesus, man, why go to med school? Why not go sell bananas on the beach? And then he said, I really want to make the last, few hundred years count, really matter. And I said, oh, well, that's actually kind of sort of hopeful in a really dark way. But I think we've never been better situated to actually last for the long term. We have, even though we've also never been at the greater risk of being able to destroy ourselves ever since really the first nuclear test, when Tony Orb has a great book about this called The Precipice, where the precipice for humanity is at one point we made technologies that we weren't sure whether or not they would destroy the Earth or the entire universe. So the math was incomplete and there was too much error, but they tested the bomb anyway. But it's an extraordinary place as a species to think we now have something in our hands that may destroy the Earth and possibly a chain reaction that destroys the whole universe. Let's try it anyway as a stage that we're at as a species. But with that power comes an ability to get to other planets, to survive long term. And when you think about the heat death, that's an ad infinitum question. If you keep thinking, well, we survive, we go to the next sun, and then you go to the next sun, eventually the question will be, well, if you just keep doing that forever, at some point the universe either continues to expand or it could collapse back in itself. And that heat death is more likely at this point, where it just keeps expanding, everything gets too far away. But even in that case, I think if we had a fundamental knowledge of physics and space-time that you could try and restructure quite literally the shape of the universe to prevent it, I think we would. I think we would want to survive. I think, unless we had done the math and we think that there's a greater chance that the next universe would form and make more life, maybe we would. But even then, I think humans have always wanted to survive, and you could argue maybe should survive because...
And are able to engineer systems that help us survive.
Yeah, and always have, yeah.
So what is this, though? The Tsar Bomb? Yeah, the hydrogen. Yeah, there's nothing more terrifying and somehow inspiring than watching the mushroom cloud of a nuclear explosion. It's like humans are capable of this. They're capable of leveraging the power of nature
To completely obliterate,
destroy everything,
and to create propulsion. I mean, most of the Voyager spacecraft are nuclear powered because it's still in many ways the most efficient way to get a tiny amount of fissile material and make power out of it. So they're still slowly drifting. They're past the heliosphere. They're out now into interstellar space, and they're nuclear powered. So it's like any tool or technology. It's a tool or a weapon depending on how you hold it.
Are we alone in the universe, Chris Mason? What do you think? So the presumption that you've just mentioned is let's just focus on our thing.
Yeah, for now. For now. Well, I think as far as we know, there's no other sentient life out in the universe that we've found yet. And I think there's probably bacterial life out there, just because we found it everywhere we've looked on Earth. It is, and there's halophilic organisms that can survive in extreme salts. There are psychrophiles that in extreme cold. There's basically organisms that can survive in really almost any possible environment. They can adapt and find a way to live. But as far as we know, we're the only sentient ones. And I think this is the famous the Drake equation, or how many where is everyone is what Enrico Fermi said is why haven't we heard from anyone if there are these other life forms? I actually think the question is wrong to phrase it that way, because the Earth has only been here for 4.5 billion years, and life maybe only for a few billion of those years, complex life only for several 100 million years of life we've actually had, and humans only the past few million years since our last common ancestor. So it's not that much time. But if you think even further back, the universe hasn't had that much time itself to cool and create atoms and have them spread around the universe, right? So the current estimate's 13.8 billion years of just the whole universe, but it spent the first 5 or 6 of those billion years really just like cooling and making enough of the stars to then make the atoms that would come from supernovas. So I actually think we might be the first, or still one of the very few, or one of the early life forms, but the universe itself hasn't had that much time to make life in a galactic and universal time frame. You needed billions of years for the elements to be created and then distributed. And we're only really in I think the last few billion years where I think even life could have been made. So I think the question of wherever is everyone is the wrong question. I think the question is, I think we are the first ones at the party. Let's set up the liquor. Let's set up the food. I just think we're the first ones at the party of life, but more people are coming.
One of the early attendees to the party.
Yeah, or maybe the first, as far as we know, the first, but maybe we'll
in
find
the
someone.
local pocket of the universe.
Yeah.
Because the parties then expand and it overflows. And
Yeah,
that
right.
kind of
I think, and then there's a mosh pit, and then you bump into the other galaxy. I think the question should be, when else is everyone getting here instead of where is everyone? I think we've just started on the genesis of life in the universe.
Yeah, so not worry have they or not, more about when and who and how do we set up the party.
Right, and then how do we help them? I think it's an interesting other moral question is, do we, a lot of Star Trek episodes, the prime directive is you do not interfere with another planet if you could pass by a planet. I think it's time to also revisit that, because what if you go by a planet and we think that with, as far as we can tell with enough certainty, that they would never be able to leave their planet, and then the sun eventually would engulf that planet, wherever that planet might be in some solar system. But if we had a way to help them, their culture, their science, their technology, everything about a different species to survive, would we not interfere? I think that would actually be wrong to say, well, we can save this life here, and we decide not to. We decide after millions and billions of years pass, and we know the sun will engulf that planet, like what will happen with our planet, and we don't interfere. That's watching a train hit someone on the tracks and not moving the train. So,
in terms of the effort of humans becoming a multiplanetary species, in terms of priorities, how much would you allocate to trying to make contact with aliens and getting their help? And if we look at the next 500 beyond years, and just versus option number 2, really just focusing on setting up the party on our own engineering, on our own the genome, the biology of humanity, the AI, collaborating with humans, just all the engineering challenges and opportunities that we're exploring.
I'm focused in my lab, of course, a lot on the engineering of genomes, the monitoring of astronauts during long missions. Reaching out to other aliens. We've been doing reach out to aliens since the first radio waves have been broadcast, so we're doing some of it. But to do a real,
you made it sound like your lab is mostly focused on biology, but you also reach out occasionally to aliens.
Occasionally, when they visit, they bring their whiskey, and we have a drink. But I think we can do. We've been broadcasting into space for at this point almost a century, getting close to, and but it's not been structured. So I think it's very cheap and easy to send out structured messages, like what Carl Sagan wrote about in Contact, doing prime numbers and sending those out to indicate intelligence. So there's things we can do that I think are very cheap and very easy. So we should do some of that. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. This is one of the biggest critiques people often say of space research and even spaceflight in general. Is it's too expensive. Shouldn't we solve poverty? Shouldn't we cure diseases? And the answer is always, as it always has been, is that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can pass the Civil Rights Act and go to the moon in the same decade. You can improve and get rid of structural inequality while getting to the moon and Mars in this decade. So I think we can do both.
Yeah, they kind of help each other. There's sometimes criticism of like ridiculous science, like studying penguins or something, or studying the patterns of birds or fish and so on.
Some congressman stands up and says, "This is a waste of taxpayer dollars," but someone says, "Oh, but we." And for example, CRISPR was pure research for 25 years. Now it's a household word, and students are editing genomes in high school. But it was just pure research on weird bacteria living actually in salt, hypersaline lakes and rivers for decades, and then eventually became a massive therapeutic, which has led to curing of diseases in this past year.
And there's stuff that you discover as part of the research that you didn't anticipate that have nothing to do with the actual research. Like oceanography is one of the interesting things about that whole field is that it's a huge amount of data, neuroscience too, actually. So you could discover computer science things like machine learning things, or even data storage manipulation, distributed compute things by forcing yourself to get something done about on the oceanography side. That's how you invent the internet and all those kinds of things. So to me, looking for aliens out there in the universe is a motivator that just inspires everybody, young people, old people, scientists, artists, engineers, entrepreneurs, everybody. Somehow that line between fear and beauty, because
aliens are like perfectly merged, basically.
Yeah.
It's this
because we don't know. I mean, for you, let's start talking about primitive alien life. Are you excited by it, or are you terrified?
I want to make a lotion out of it. I think it'd be great if it's alien life, assuming it's safe. But I'm very excited. It doesn't have to be a
You
lotion.
just said a half sentence, presuming it's safe. That's the fundamental question I'm trying to get at.
So, if you could, yes, presuming it's safe. So, I think we have this. This is the beginning of some planetary protection is happening now. Is we're bringing rocks back from Mars in 2033 if all goes according to plan. But there's always a danger. What if you bring this back, and what if it's alive? What if it will kill all of humanity? Or Michael Crichton wrote a book, The Andromeda Strain, about this very idea. And it could, but it hopefully won't. And the only way you can, really gauge that is the same way we do with any infectious agent here on Earth, right? If it's a new pathogen, a new organism, you do it slowly, carefully. You often do it with levels of containment. So, and it's going to be probably have to be where some pioneers go, and would be, for example, on Mars. There might be other organisms there that only get activated once there's an ambient temperature and more humidity. And then suddenly the first settlers on Mars are encountering a strange new fungus or something that's not even like a fungus, because it might be a different clade of life, a different branch of life, and could be very dangerous, or it could be very inert. I mean, most of life on Earth is not really dangerous or harmful. Let me go back on this. Most of life on Earth is neither harmful nor beneficial to you. It's just they're making its own way in the universe, just trying to survive. It's when it's inside of you and replicating in your cells and destroying your cells, like a virus, like COVID, SARS-CoV-2, that it becomes a big problem, of course. But it's just doesn't really have agency. It's just trying to get by. And so, for example, most of the bacteria on the table, on your skin, in the subway are pretty inert. They're just people hanging around for the ride.
And actually, just because we're talking so much trash about viruses, most viruses don't bother humans.
Yeah, they're phages. Almost all the vast majority of viruses are phages. There's the battle in the biology that is really dorky, is that bacteria think that they're the most, people who study bacteria think the bacteria are the most important because there's trillions and trillions of them. They run a lot of our own biology in our body. But then people who study phages, they say, well, there's 10 times more phages than the bacteria, which just can attack the bacteria and destroy them as well. So phage people think that they run the world, but we need them both.
What do you think about viruses? All right, so because you said alien organisms, wouldn't we encounter something like bacteria, something like viruses, as the first alien life form? First of all, are viruses alive or not?
so the book definition, if you go pick up a biology textbook, they'd say technically no, because they don't have the ability to self-replicate independently. But I would think if you restructure how you view what life is in terms of autonomously aggregating and replicating of information. For example, AI at some point, what if there's an AI platform that we could consider alive? Like, at what point would you allow it to say it's alive? And I think we have the same definitional challenge there, is that if it can continually propagate instructions for its own existence, then it is a version of living. I think, viruses don't get that category because they can't do it on their own, but they are a version of life, I'd say, but probably not alive.
Well, they are expressing themselves and doing so on occasion quite powerfully in human civilization. So, like you said, at which point are AI systems allowed to say
We're life. We are
allowed? Humans must allow them. And the viruses didn't ask for permission to express themselves to humans. They just kind of did.
Yeah.
We didn't have to allow them. Are they overall, though, exciting or terrifying to you as somebody who has studied viruses?
Well, whenever given two options, there's always two more. You could do both or neither. So here, I'll say they're both terrifying and exciting, I think, to me. More exciting than terrifying, I think. If I had to make that sandwich, and how many layers are, meat versus cheese, there's a lot more cheese of excitement.
And meat is
the fear,
is the fear
in this metaphor, apparently.
in the sandwich. Well, I love both, so it's a hell of a delicious sandwich. You quote President Dwight D. Eisenhower in your book, quote, "Plans are useless, but planning is essential." And you provide a thought experiment called entropy goggles. Can you describe this thought experiment?
Happily, I do this almost every day somewhere when I'm sitting in a given room. I will. Well, a quick comment about that quote, actually, for all the NASA planning meetings for the Twin study and other missions, that was often the quote that goes put up on the wall before we'd sit down for the day to plan the mission. It was that quote, which I
Plans are useless.
but planning essential, which I thought was hilarious for an official NASA meeting.
Yeah.
But it was because you need to have a plan, but you have to know that plan might change. And so I think that's just a quick context for that quote. Craig Kundro, who's a leader at NASA, is headquarters now. I would always put that first slide up, and I'm like, this meeting's either going to go really well or really bad. I don't know what's about to happen, but it's an inspiring quote because it's very true. In any case, the entropy goggles is a thought experiment I detail in my book, which is if you just sit in a room, any room, wherever you are, and imagine what it will look like in 10 years, 100 years, 500 years, or even thousands of years, it is a wonderfully terrifying and exciting exercise. Again, it's definitely both, because you realize the transience of everything. That you think of what might survive. Almost everything that you're looking at will probably not be there in hundreds of years. It'll be at the very least degraded, or it might be changed, altered, completely different, moved. It is just, and it's that trait, though, of humans to just sit there and project into the future easily, really seamlessly with whatever you're doing previously, is powerful, because it shows what can change and what should change in some cases, but also that left to its own devices, the universe entropy would come take over, and really things would decay, things would be destroyed. But the only thing really preventing, I think, some of the entropy is really humans, these sort of sentient creatures that are aware of extinction like ourselves. Is really one of the only forces in the universe that's counteracting the second law of thermodynamics, this entropy that's always increasing. Technically, we're actually still increasing it because we emit heat and we never have perfect capture of all of energy, but we're the only things really actively and consciously resisting it. Really, you could say life in general does this. Like ants do this when they build their big homes. They're rearranging the universe to make a nice place for themselves, and they're counteracting entropy. But we could actually do it in a way that would be at a large scale and for long term. But the entropy goggles is just a way to realize how transient everything is, and just imagine everything that will decay or change in the room around you. So if anyone listening, if they're listening on a train or they're driving in their car, wherever someone is listening right now, looking around, everything can and will change. And so then at first it's terrifying to see that, oh my gosh, everything will decay and go away. But then I think it's actually liberating. I think, wait, I can affect this change. I can prevent it, or I can affect it, or I can improve the change that may occur all by itself, say naturally. And so I think it is, but is it that awareness, again, of the frailty of life, the ever insistence in increase in entropy, that you can address, though. And actually, I say the same thing to first-year medical students. I teach them genetics. I point early in the course. I say, here's all these charts of how the human body decays over time. And I call it the inexorable march towards molecular oblivion, which the students often find they kind of laugh at, because on all the charts they're 22 years old, but older people do not laugh as much at the thought of molecular oblivion, but we're all marching towards it to a large degree.
So this is both a great thought experiment for the environment around you, so just looking at all the objects around you, that they will dissipate, they'll disappear with time. But then it's also the thing you mentioned, which is how can I affect any of the world? Like you're one little creature, and it's like your life is kind of, you get dropped into this ocean and you make a little splash. And how do I make it so the splash lasts for a little bit longer? Because it ultimately will, I suppose the wave will continue indefinitely, but it'd be such a small impact that it's almost indetectable. And so how do I have that impact at all? On so many levels, I get to experience this as a human. Like I recently had my cold storage hacked to where it was locked. Essentially, it wasn't hacked; it was locked, and so you get to lose all your data. So, for example, if you lose all your data, if you lose all your online presence, your social media, your emails, if you think of all the things you could lose in a fire. There's been a lot of fires in the United States. If you lose your home,
Yeah.
and it makes you realize, wait a minute, this is exactly a nice simulation of what will happen anyway,
Yeah.
eventually, and that eventually comes pretty quickly. And so it allows you to focus on, how can I actually affect? So what matters, what lasts, and what brings me joy. I suppose that the ultimate answer is nothing lasts. So you have to focus on the things in the moment that bring you joy and that have a positive impact on those around you. That focusing on something that's long lasting is perhaps, I don't know, it's complicated, right? Because
Well, it used to be foolhardy to say, I want to think, like, legacy is often what people think of as they approach the end of their life. What is my legacy? What have I done?
Yeah.
Even younger in life. But it used to be really foolhardy to say I could affect something that would, or people would build a building. Architects would say, I put my name on this building and there I'll have some sense of immortality. But it's a fleeting dream. It's not, you can't reach immortality. And if you could, it would be resource, taxing on everyone else if you really were. But I think it's okay. I mean, the book's the next 500 years, but I presume I'll be dead for the vast majority of that time. And but that is actually the liberating state of mortality, is that you don't have forever. So it means, what can you do that is the most impactful? But you can build things that you say, I want to pass this on to the next generation. Again, the most obvious thing we do with this is just people have kids, but they don't think of this as an intergenerational responsibility. They think of it as, well, I was at the bar one night and I met this hot girl, and then things happen. Or sometimes it's more planned than that. But there's no overarching sense of, wait, I could have something that 3 or 4 generations from now, that someone will receive this gift that was planned for them long before they were born or gestating. And I think we have that capacity, and that can be a version of legacy. But it's even okay if no one knows exactly who started it, but that the benefit was wrought by people, again, hundreds or even thousands of years after you got it started. So I think this is, again, something that is only really people that are economically secure can even begin to do this. Where you can say, think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you need to satisfy your physical needs, all your structural needs, and have shelter. And so, I'm sitting from a position of great privilege to be able to pontificate about what I hope I could do for people that come 200 years from now. But nonetheless, more and more people can do that. Humanity's never been in a better state quantifiably to be able to start to think about these intergenerational responsibilities.
Yeah, this is an interesting balance, because it seems that if you let the ego flare up a little bit, that's good for productivity.
Yeah.
Like saying I can somehow achieve immortality if what I do is going to be pretty good.
Right.
But then that's actually being kind of dishonest with yourself, because it won't, in the long arc of history, won't matter,
Right.
in terms of your own ego, but it will have a small piece to play in a larger puzzle.
and
that
help
it-
people. Yeah,
to
I mean, I
help
think,
people many generations from now.
and that they said there were all these people who were looking after me before I was ever born. I think it's because it's a bit of just even just know what if when you go to a campsite, there's a camping rule that you always leave the campsite better than you found it. So if the fire pit was somewhat damaged and you got there, you fix it. If there was no wood, you leave a few bits of logs for the next person who comes.
Yeah.
And this ethos is something that we just picked up from camping. And so I think if we did that as people, the world would be a better place, and the world coming ahead would also be.
That said, with these entropy glasses, how can you see through the fog? 500 years is a long time. First of all, why 500 years? Most people, this is so refreshing because most colleagues and friends I talk to don't have the guts to think even like 10 years out. They start doing wishy-washy kind of statements about, well, you don't know. But it's so refreshing to say, all right, I know there's so many trajectories that this world can take, but I'm going to pick a few and think through them and think what it's the quote, right? Plans are useless, but planning is essential. So why 500 years?
So 500 was a little bit of what I felt like I could see clearly through the entropy goggles. I feel like I can't
Which is a
see.
contradiction in terms, yes.
Right. I can see. I mean, for example, if you said, Chris, what's going to happen in 1,000,000 years? Well, I'll start to describe, what happens to the moon will be farther away because it moves several inches away every year, and so then eventually you can't have a full lunar eclipse after a while. I think about structures of the continents will change and things will move. I could start to describe some things, but it starts to become so vague. It's just not a useful exercise. I think if it's too far out, if it's too soon, that's not that much different from what people just do with the news and say, I think this is what the economy might look like over the next year or 2 years. Economists are notoriously not held accountable when they have really bad predictions. You can make really awful predictions and no one seems to care. You can just make another one next week. So too short is, I think, not necessarily as helpful. But 500, I actually, when I was first working on the book and thinking about the title, I thought, well, do I do 1,000 or 2,000? I kept thinking about, the main idea was, if I were to pick this up 500 years from now, what would it look like? Or I changed the number. If I pick it up 1,000 years from now or 100, and I kept trying to think of what are some time frames where really large scale changes have happened. And so in some sense, you could argue that humans been mostly the same for about 3,000 or 4,000 years. And the best example is this. You looked at some of the Homer's poems or the Greek tragedies and Oedipus, for example. Like humans are really almost identical. Like we're still petty, and people, have affairs, and people do things they shouldn't, and people. You're
saying all those things like it's bad.
I know, it's just me. You read that. It's astounding and in some sense soothing that the Greek tragedies of 2,300 years ago are very relatable to what happens in every high school, right? So people, that's why you read them in high school. Like, oh, it's really a clear part of the human condition. So in that sense, some things are really permanent. But I wanted to think of a few reasons I chose 500 is that it's a time frame where I could foresee clear development of some biotechnology that will get us to a new place, including missions to Mars that are planned that will be there, and that we'd start to have settlements there on the moon and Mars. And I could see also that by that time, I think we would have enough knowledge of biology and technology and space medicine to start to prepare for an interstellar mission, to actually send people on a craft that would have what's called a generation ship. People live and die on the same spacecraft on the way towards a destination. But I think we need that much time to actually perfect the technology and to learn enough about physiology to be able to make it for that distance.
And the book is kind of focused on the human story. So a specific slice of the possible futures.
Yes.
There could be sort of AI systems. There could be other technologies that kind of build up the world. So much of the world might be lived in virtual reality.
Yeah.
So you're not touching any of that. You're sticking to biology. Well, not you're touching a little bit, but focused on what the cells that make up the human body. How do they change? How do we design technologies to repair them? And how do we protect them? And as they travel out into the cosmos.
Absolutely. And it's something that is part of the duty. If your duty is to keep life safe, you have to consider all means to do so. And engineering life to save itself is definitely on that list. And, I think we can imagine in that time frame, 500 years, that we would, there will be AI that it's continually advancing, and I actually say that I'm matter agnostic towards cognition. So if your matter is carbon atoms and cells and tissues, and you have cognition, bravo, good for you. If you're silicon based and you're in chips and you're in AI, that's all virtual. But we reach a state of well beyond the Turing test and really clearly intelligent. Congratulations to you too. So I feel like this sense of duty is applicable regardless of what the state of matter your cognition is based in. So I would imagine that AI platforms that are really intelligent might also get a sense of this duty, or I hope they would. I wrote the book for them too.
They can carry that flame of whatever makes humans special. So, but why, nevertheless, is so much of your focus on this human meat vehicle? Do you think it's essential?
It doesn't have to be meat. No, it definitely does not. It could be. I'm hoping that the AI platforms that we've built, or that would start to build themselves, would also carry the sense of duty, because at that point they would be life. And so, whichever means that life, whatever form life takes, it should have this duty, I think.
Will it have the lessons of genetics, genomics, DNA and RNA and proteins and the squishy stuff that makes us human? Are those lessons a temporary thing that we'll discard, or will those lessons be carried forward?
I mean, like if the machines completely take over, let's say, and it's all
not necessarily completely take over, but either completely take over or merge with humans in some interesting way, where we, as opposed to figuring out how to repair cells and protect cells, we start having some cyborg cells.
I think we will. There'll definitely be a blending, and blending's already happened. There's prosthetic limbs, there's cybernetic limbs, there's Neuralink. Progress being made to blend biology and cybernetics and machines for sure. But I think in the long term, we'll see that they are fairly. The biology be useful because it's a manufacturing system. All of life is a way to create copies of things or to replicate information, including storage of information. Actually, hard drives are probably one of the worst ways for long-term storage. DNA might end up being the best way to have millennia or even longer scale storage, where you want something that has redundancy that's built in, and it can store and can be put at really cold temperatures and survive even cosmic rays. So I think DNA might be the best hard drive of the future, potentially.
This is really interesting. Okay, what is DNA? What is RNA? And what are genes?
Yes, we should, because I presume the audience knows it, but some might just be first-time listeners coming in.
There's a person right now
who's like
in Brazil smoking a joint, sitting on the beach, and just wants to learn about DNA. So please, Chris, can you explain it to them?
DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, is the recipe for life. It is what carries the instructions. In almost all of your cells, you have a copy of your genome. It's actually the reason I became a geneticist, is because the day I learned that as an embryo, we start as just a single cell, but all the instructions there to make every single type of cell in your body, I was and still am endlessly fascinated by that. That is extraordinary. That is, to me, the most beautiful thing in the entire universe. That it is completely, from one single embryo, everything is there to make the entire body.
Which aspect of that is most beautiful? So is it that there's this information within DNA that's stored efficiently, and it also stores information on how to build, not just what to build.
Yeah.
And so from all of that, what's the sexiest, what's the most beautiful aspect? Is it the entire machinery, or is it just the information is there?
It's the fact that the machinery is the information, like that they basically, it becomes its own manufacturer. Is what is extraordinary. Imagine if you took a 1 2x4 and you threw it on the ground and you said, "I'll be back in a day," and then a whole house was made when you came back. I mean, we would all lose our minds. A lot of people would poop their pants. People would have to wear adult diapers. It would be a big scene.
Yes.
If that happened. And that we're actually getting close to that. People having autonomous house building. It's not quite there yet, but there are people trying to make robots that will build entire houses.
But you need much more than the block of wood.
Right. That's the extraordinary thing, is it just fit one piece of wood there and say, "I'll just leave it there for a few days and I'll come back." Yeah. That's basically what embryos do. Okay, it takes 9 months, a little bit longer, but still, that is nothing short of magic, right? So I think that's what I love about the fact that DNA carries that information. Now the information is static, so to actually read that information and to actually put it into motion is where RNA comes in. So this ribonucleic acid, so it just has one other oxygen added to it. versus DNA, but it is the transcribed version. It's like if you look at a book and you say you can have it in your hands, but then you start to read it aloud, it becomes the active form of the recipe for life is the RNA. And then those RNAs also then get translated to become proteins, that become active forms like enzymes. You think of like your hair, or think of other ways you digest food. There's all these active proteins going around that are copying your DNA, making RNA, making sure your DNA is safe. There's all these built-in systems to keep your cells in check and working, and these are often in protein form. And so genes are these constructs. Basically, what are the instruction sets? Like, how many versions of instructions do you have in your genome? So the genome is the collection of all the DNA of a person. For humans, it's about 3 billion letters of genetic code. So just 3 billion A's, C's, G's, and T's, these nucleotides that are the recipe for life. And that's it. That is the entire instruction set to go from that one embryo up to a full human, which is pretty efficient, if you say. That's actually not that much information. And in that 3 billion letters are snippets of the genes, which are independently regulated, autonomous instruction sets, if you will, these really active forms of the instructions from your DNA to say, make a protein, make this RNA, or turn off some other part of a cell. All those instructions are there in our DNA, and there's about 60,000 of these genes that are in our genome.
So how do those all lead up to you having a personality, good memory and bad memory, some of the functional characteristics that we at the human level are able to interpret, the way your face look, the way you smile, you're good at running or jumping, whether you're good at math and all those kinds of things.
There's an age-old debate of nature versus nurture. So like most things, if given two options, you can of course have both. So almost every trait that we know of in humanity has mixtures of nurture and nature. Some of them are purely nurture. So most people are probably familiar with twin studies, but twin studies are one of the best ways to gauge how much is something nurture versus nature, how much of it is really ingrained and has probably less ability to change versus how much can you really train. So height, for example, is one of the most obvious inheritable traits, but it doesn't have one gene. It probably has at least 50 or 60 genes that contribute to height. So there's not like a gene for height. Some people think of like the gene for cystic fibrosis. Now in that case, that's true. There is one gene that if you have mutations, you get cystic fibrosis as a disease. But for other traits, they're much more complicated. They can have dozens or even hundreds of genes that influence your risk and what appears. But from twin studies, you take monozygotic twins that are identical, and you can clearly tell they have the same facial structure, similar intonations, similar even likes, and you compare them to dizygotic twins, or when you have fraternal twins, you can have a male and female, for example, in the same uterus, and those are dizygotic twins or two zygotes. So in that case, they share 50% of their DNA, but they share the same womb. And then what you can look at is what's the difference between identical twins versus fraternal twins, and calculate that difference for any trait, and that gives you an estimate of the heritability, or what's called H squared. So that's what we've been doing for almost every trait in humanity for the past 100 years. We've been trying to measure this, and religion is one that's a negative control. So if you separate people and see what religion they become, there's no gene for religion or what religion you choose. So that often the correlation there is zero, because it should be. It's a nurture trait. What religion you end up taking is not encoded in your DNA.
Religion meaning Islam, Judaism, Christianity, but there could be aspects of religions that.
Good question. There is religiosity as a trait,
yes,
which has been studied in twins, and that has a heritable component to some degree. So, and things like boredom susceptibility is a trait. One of my favorite papers just looked at how likely is it that people get bored, and they looked at identical twins and fraternal twins, and there's a heritability of about 30%. So it's mostly not heritable. It's like mostly environmental, but that means to some degree, whether or not you're bored, you can say, well, it's a little bit of my genes. You could, it's a little bit, not a lot, but most traits have some degree of, and they're probably overlapping with other traits, like your boredom susceptibility versus risk-seeking behavior are interrelated. So how likely are you to say, I want to go, cliff jumping, or I want to do freebasing, or I want to, I don't know, do something else that's risky behavior.
So speaking of twin studies, Scott Kelly spent 340 consecutive days out in space. You analyzed his molecular data, DNA, RNA, protein, small molecules. What did you learn about the effect of space on the human body from Scott?
We learned that space is rough on the human body, but that the human body is amazingly and monstrously responsive to adapt to that challenge. It can rise to the occasion. So we could see Scott had, as almost all astronauts do, a bit of puffiness and spikes in his bloodstream of these what are called cytokines, or these inflammation markers where the body is clearly saying to itself, holy crap, I'm in space. And liters of fluid move to the upper torso and they get a puffy face, what's called the astronaut face, that is very common, but it goes away after a few days. And some astronauts maintain high levels of stress for their whole mission, as measured by cortisol or some of these other inflammation markers. Whereas Scott actually had a little spike, but then he was cool as a cucumber for most of the mission. But he had spent, at that time, that was the longest ever mission for a U.S. astronaut. A few cosmonauts have gone a little bit longer, but there'd never been a deep molecular analysis of what happens to the body after about a year in space. So it was the first study of this kind. And what we found is when he got back, we saw all the same markers of stress on the body and changes spiked up to levels we'd never seen for any other astronaut before. So it seemed like going to space for a year wasn't so hard as much as returning to gravity after a year. It was much harder on the body. He notoriously had, broke out in a rash all over his body, and really, even the weight of clothing on his skin was too heavy. It created all this irritation because his body had not felt the weight of just a simple T-shirt. It wasn't really, had zero weight, of course, right? So up in space. So that led to all this inflammation, all these changes. He had to, it was much more comfortable just to walk around nude. In that case, it was for a medical reason. Some people do this, recreationally. He was doing it for medical purposes.
I do it for medical reasons.
Well, that's right.
All the time.
People say...
I have a prescription. The doctor told me. So he was allergic to Earth, which is fascinating to think about, actually. How quick did his body adapt there?
So there it was about 3 to 4 days he got back to normal, at least in terms of the inflammation. But what's extraordinary is that we measured a lot of other molecules, genes, structural changes, tissue, looked at his eyeballs, looked at his vasculature. It took him even 6 months after the mission, a lot of the genes that had become activated in response to spaceflight were still active. So things like, we could see his body repairing DNA. He was being irradiated by cosmic rays and by the radiation. It's the equivalent of giving like 3 or 4 chest x-rays every day, just in space. And we could see his body working hard at the molecular level to repair itself. And even in his urine, we could see bits of what's called 8-oxoguanosine, is a form of damaged DNA that you could see coming out. And we see it for other astronauts as well. So it's very common. You can see damaged DNA, the response of the body to repair the DNA. But even though he'd been back on Earth for 6 months, that was still happening, even 6 months later.
How do you explain that?
So some of this has to do with when you have a gene get activated, you might think, oh, it's like a light switch. I'll look at my wall, just flip a light on or off. And sometimes turning a gene on or off is that simple. Sometimes you just flip it on because the gene is already ready to go. Mm-hmm. Other cases, though, you have to reprogram even the structure of how your DNA is packaged. Yeah. It's called an epigenetic rearrangement. In that case, we could see in it that a lot of these genes had been, his cells had changed the structure of how DNA was packaged, and it remained open even months after the mission. Now, after about a year, it was actually almost all back to normal. 99% of all the genes were back to where they were in pre-flight levels. So it means that eventually you'll adapt, but there is almost a lag time, kind of like jet lag for the body, but jet lag for your cells to repair all the DNA.
What was the most surprising thing that you found in that study?
There are several surprises. One is just that the repair, like as I just mentioned, that the repair took so long. I thought maybe a week or a few days he'll be back to normal. But to see this molecular echo in his cells of his time in space occurring was interesting. His telomeres was one that was really surprising. The caps on the ends of your chromosomes, which keep all your DNA packaged, and you get half your chromosomes from your mother and half from your father, and then you go on and make all your cells. Normally, these shrink as you get older, and telomeres, length is just an overall sign of aging, getting shorter. His telomeres got longer in space. And this was really surprising because we thought the opposite would happen. So that was genetically one surprise. And also some of the mutations we found in his blood, he had less mutations in blood, as if his body was almost being like a low dose of radiation was sort of cleansing his body of maybe the cells that were about to die. Is one of our main theories on what's happening.
And of course, you have theories, but you can't, because the number of subjects in the study is small.
Right. It's notoriously one of the lowest powered studies in human history. Yes, but what you lack in subjects, you can make up for in the number of sampling time. So we did basically 260 samples collected over the course of 3 years. So we really almost every few weeks had a full workup, including in space. So that was the way we tried to make up for it. But we've tried in other model organisms. In mice, we've seen this. We've looked now at 59 other astronauts. And in every astronaut that we've looked at, their telomeres get longer in space.
Does that indicate anything about lifespan, all those kinds of things, or no? You can't make any of those kinds of jumps?
Not yet. I won't make that jump yet, but it does indicate that there is a version of cleansing, if you will, that's happening in space. A mixture of, we see this actually clinically at our hospital. You can do a low dose of radiation with some targeted therapies to kind of activate your immune cells is even tried clinically. So this idea of just a little bit of stress on the body, or what's called hormesis, might prime you into active of cleansing things that were about to die.
And that includes stress caused by space.
Yes, yeah, apparently.
So how do we adapt the human body to stress of this kind for periods of multiple years? What lessons do you draw from that study and other experiments in space that give you an indication of how we can survive for multiple years?
I think we know that the radiation is one of the biggest risk factors, and this has been well described by NASA and many other astronauts and researchers. And so there, we don't have to just measure the radiation or just look at DNA being damaged. We can actually actively repair it. This happens naturally in all of our cells. There's little enzymes, little protein, and really many machines that go around and scan DNA for nicks and breaks and repair it. We could improve them. We could add more of them, or you can even activate them before you go into space. So we have one set of cells in my lab where you activate them before we irradiate them to actually prepare them for the dose of radiation. And now that is what's called epigenetic CRISPR therapies, where you can actually, instead of adding or taking away a gene or modifying a cell, you just change kind of how it's packaged. Like I was just describing, that the DNA, the genes are still there. We're just changing how they get used. And so you can actually preemptively activate DNA repair genes. And we've done this for cells. We haven't done this yet for astronauts, but we've done it for cells. And a similar idea to this is being used to treat sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. As you can reactivate a gene that was dormant as a therapy.
So should we make human genes resilient to harsh conditions, or should we get good at repairing them?
I want to get good at.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I think every time I ask this question, you have taught me that there's always a third option.
That's
Say
right.
both.
I will say both. I know, for copy, it's good to just have one big statement, but you want to do both, good. Or a third option, I would want to, do electromagnetic shielding. I would want to do a fourth option of, maybe some other kind of physical defenses.
So outside of the human body.
Yeah. So we're taking the same passion to keep astronauts safe that's outside them and just putting it in their cells is what I propose. And now it's a bit radical today because, we're just starting this in clinical trials to treat, diseases on Earth. So it's not ready, I think, to do in astronauts. But in the book, I propose by about the year 2040, that's when we'd reach this next phase where I think we'll have known enough about the clinical response. We'll have the technology ironed out. That's about when it's time, I think, to try it.
So what are some interesting early milestones? So you said 2040. What do we have to look forward to in the next 10, 20 years, according to your book, according to your thoughts?
A lot of really exciting developments where if you really want to activate genes, like I was just describing, or repair a specific disease gene, you can actually CRISPR it out, modify it. This has been already published and well documented. But as I was alluding to, more and more we'll see people that you just want to temporarily change your genes' functions and change their activity. So the best example of this is for beta thalassemia. We all have hemoglobin in our blood that carries oxygen around. And when you're an adult, it's a different version. It's a different gene. You have one gene when you're a fetus called fetal hemoglobin. When you're an adult, you have a different gene. But they both are making a protein that carries oxygen. After you're born, the fetal hemoglobin gene gets just turned off. It goes away, and you replace it with adult hemoglobin. But if your gene for hemoglobin is bad as an adult, one of the therapies is, well, let's turn back on the gene that you had when you were a fetus. And it's actually already led to cures for sickle cell and beta thalassemia in this past year. So it's this extraordinary idea of like, well, you already have some of the genetic solutions in your body. Why don't we just reactivate them and see if you can live? And indeed you can. So I think we'll see more of that. That's for severe disease, but eventually you could see it for more, I think, work-related purposes. Like if you're working in a dangerous mine or in a high radiation environment, you could basically start to prime it for work safety. Basically, we need to genetically protect you. Now, it would have to be shown that genetic option is safe, reliable, that it's better, that at least as good or if not better than other shielding methods. But I think we'll start to see that more in the next 10, 20 years. And eventually, as I describe in the book, you could get to recreational genetics. You could say, well, I want to turn some genes on just for this weekend because I'm going to a high altitude. So I'd like to prepare for that. And so instead of having to take weeks and weeks for acclimation, you could just do some quick epigenetic therapies and have a good time in the mountains and then come back and turn them back off.
So this is stuff to do on Earth
Yeah.
across thousands of humans, and then you start getting good data about what the effects on the human body are. How do we make humans survive across an entire lifetime for, well, let's say several decades in space?
If it's just in space, it'll be hard because you'll need basically some gravity at some point. I think you'd need orbital platforms that give you at least some partial gravity, if not 1G. If you're on Mars, it's actually, even though the gravity is 38% of Earth's, just having that gravity would be enough. And if you could get under the surface into some of the lava tubes where you have some protection above you from the radiation, I think that would be, you probably could survive quite well there. So I think it's just in space part that's hard. You'd need some gravity, you need some additional protection from the radiation.
Can you linger on the lava tubes at Mars? What are the lava tubes at Mars?
Yeah, so they are a bit like what they sound like. They were large masses of lava at one point on the planet, pushing really quickly through the environment, and they created these basically these small caverns, which you could go in theory and build a small habitat and puff it up, kind of like a blowing up a balloon, and have a protective habitat. Basically, it's a little bit underground. So one of the next helicopter missions being planned at the Jet Propulsion Lab is to see if you can get a helicopter to go into the lava tube, and which is just like, as it sounds, kind of like take out a big worm that has burrowed into the landscape and leave out the hollow column that's left, and that's what your tubes look like. So one of the future helicopters might even go explore one of them. Is a mission being planned right now.
So they're accessible without significant amount of drilling?
Yeah, that's the other advantage. Yeah, you can get to them because some of them are exposed. You can do a little bit of drilling and then see essentially this entire
And that
cavern.
protects you a little bit from the radiation.
Because you have some soil above you, basically, which would be a regolith, which would be nice.
What about source of food? What's a good, so that's part of biology. How do you power this whole thing?
Yeah.
What about source of food across decades?
In space, we'd
In
have
space.
to. Plants have been grown in flight, and you can get some nutrients, but right now it is very reliant on all the up mass being sent up, all the freeze-dried food that then gets rehydrated, which doesn't taste awful, but is not self-reliant, right? So I think those would have to be small bioreactors. It'd have to be a lot of work on fermentation, a lot of work on potentially prototrophic organisms, the organisms that can make all of the 20 amino acids that you would need to eat. I describe a little bit in the book, what if we did a prototrophic human, where you could have, like right now we need to get some of our amino acids because we can't make them all, which I think is kind of sad. So what if we could make all of our own amino acids or all of our own vitamins? I also, I think that's one case where another adaptation could be to activate the vitamin C gene. Like right now you'd have to have limes or some other source of vitamin C in space. But we actually carry the gene inside of our genome to make vitamin C. Look at dogs and cats, for example. They have these kind of wet noses. You don't see them going out and getting margaritas, although dogs can drink beer and get drunk. They don't need vitamin C. They have no risk of scurvy because they can make the vitamin C all by themselves. So can other wet-nosed primates called Strepsirrhines. But we are dry-nosed primates, and we lost this ability. Sometimes 10 or 20 million years ago, we no longer make our own vitamin C, but the gene for it is called gulo. It's still in our DNA. It's what's called a pseudogene. It's just broken down. It's like having in our genome we have these functional genes, like a nice BMW, a nice car that works well, but we also have this this junkyard of old cars, old genes, old functions in our DNA that we could bring back. And so vitamin C is one of them that would be very easy to do. So then you could activate the gene, repair it so we can make our own vitamin C. Now we'd have to do it again carefully, because what if we lost vitamin C, the production of vitamin C as a species? What if it was a good reason that we lost it? Maybe it was helping in some other way that we can't see now. But you'd start slowly, do it in cells, then do it potentially in animal models and other primates, and then try it in humans. But that's something else I'd like to see. So we wouldn't have to make as much food in orbit. You could actually start to make as much of your own food in your own cells.
So the input to the system in terms of energy could be much more restricted. It doesn't have to have the diversity we currently need as humans.
But I don't want to be a robot. Humans love, as I do, texture. I realize